Hi, here's May. In today's video, I'll talk about my process of drawing Genshin Impact Fontaine characters as witches or wizards. I really wanted to do some October themed art, and while I loved doing Softober last year, designing 12 characters based on prompts, I wanted to try out something different this year. Since Fontaine is the newest region in Genshin, I've been really motivated to draw some characters from there. I decided to combine this with designing witchy outfits by drawing the Fontaine characters as witches or wizards. I drew 4 characters for this project. They're all characters I haven't drawn before, so it was nice to learn more about their designs by drawing them. For the poses, I initially wanted to use 4 from my daily drawings, but I didn't like 2 of them that much. They seemed too static, so I also sketched some pose thumbnails in my sketchbook and used 2 of them, as well as 2 poses from my daily drawings in the end. A reason for why I found the poses I chose first too static was also because of my inspiration for this project. I made a mood board with a lot of references from Mahuyaku or Promise of Wizard, a game I find really cool and interesting. I like the characters there a lot. I downloaded a lot of these images into my references folder, and they included the characters as wizards in very dynamic poses. I really like dynamic poses like these, so I wanted to also include some more dynamic ones for my illustrations. Other references on this mood board include cards from Mahuyaku, character designs from the game Grand Chase, and some references from my witch and magic mood boards I used to draw the Softober character designs last year. Now let's move on to the characters. The first character I drew is Ryothesly. I apologize if I'm mispronouncing the name. He was in a sitting pose. I know I said I wanted the characters to be in rather dynamic poses, but for 2 of them I just used sitting poses. Still, these sitting poses are more on the dynamic side to me. The arms and legs are angled in different ways. In drawing witches or wizards, what often works is to make them seem like they're floating, which will often lead to a more dynamic pose. Then I had 2 ideas for head angles, and since I couldn't decide, I basically decided to just draw both instead. I would recommend choosing one pose though, since in the end you'll probably show your art only one image mostly, so adding head angles or hand pose variations can be an ineffective use of your time. It can be fun though, so if you feel like it, you can go for it. Where this actually would be useful might be for game sprites and things like that. There you at least have eye, mouth, or maybe outfit variations for the same character illustration. For drawing all outfits for this project, I went with the initial in-game designs I could see on the character cards and drew some parts or patterns I saw from there. Then I used this when coming up with accessoires. For the outfit cards, I usually was inspired by the references in my mood board and combined what I saw there. Here I started with sketching the overall cut of the shirt and pants as well as the shoe. Then I really wanted to add some dynamic flowy outfit parts in form of maybe a cape coming from his back. As you can maybe tell, I had a lot of ideas for possible outfits here, probably because this was the first character I drew, meaning I had a lot of options for outfit cuts and pieces to include. Determining the outfit here would also kind of determine what kind of outfits I would draw later on, since I wanted all characters I drew to match up. In the end, I decided to not include the bigger cape. I wanted to also add it first, since it would make the character silhouette be just a big shape. If you have the outfit on a body in white while the cape is dark, that can also work. Just make sure that the pose of the character is readable and that different outfit parts are separated so that your character forms a nice silhouette. For Ryothesly, I also decided to add in chains and fur inspired by his original character design. For adding the chains, I actually went into Clip Studio Paint since I knew there were chain brushes there. I wouldn't say the chains turned out completely realistic or perfect, but drawing them this way using a custom brush worked much faster than if I were to create my own Krita chain brush or drawing the chain pieces and copying them. Then, to make it clear that he is a wizard, I also added in a wizard head. I had to look up references for this since I don't draw witches or wizards often. Color-wise, I went with a pretty simple palette, including red, grey, silver and black, inspired by his character design. For shading the illustrations for this project, I wanted to, for one, use my general shading process, painting in shadows for the different parts like the skin, hair and so on, but then also add an overlay, multiply and other lighting layers where I would only use one color to add some more depth. Here I added some lighting from the left and from the back. Part in shadow would be in the middle of the character. For witch and dark themed illustrations, I find it often works to leave a lot of the character in shadow. Often you'll have a bright light source just from one point like the moon or magic that's used, and maybe some rim light. Next up would be Violet. He was in a sitting pose again, and I went with the same head angle but facing 2 different directions here. Both can look interesting, having the head angled in the other direction as the body looks a bit more dynamic often, but the shoulders and eyes already were at different angles here for both versions, which made the pose interesting as well. I once again couldn't decide which one to go for, so I shaded both. It basically meant just drawing the hair twice, since for the face I could just flip it since it's symmetrical. I used some hand poses I have in a separate file here. I studied hands anatomy a while back and draw from hand references in this file. Since you'll often use similar hand poses, just having separate hands in one file can make your workflow faster, but it's of course also good to draw in hands yourself to practice. Outfit-wise, it was a lot easier to decide on what I would want to go for here. I went with a bow in front, a cape, as well as some frilly sleeves. This was all very inspired by Neuvillette's in-game design again. Then I also went for longer pants. Neuvillette has this album kind of look to me for some reason. I again sketched in variations for the cape and decided to go with one that would be at the lower side around his legs. Here I added patterns inspired by his in-game design again. For this illustration, drawing the shoe line art was particularly difficult to me. I really want to practice drawing more shoes in the future to prevent myself from taking very long with drawing them. The line art here took me like 2 hours, whereas normally I could have finished this in 1.5 hours, I think. Here I went with a colder bluish palette, also including gold and turquoise. I find it interesting that for Neuvillette you have gold with blue, while for Ryothesly, silver and red. Both designs combine warm and cool colors this way. I was unsure about where to use what colors to make the different outfit parts stand out. In the end, the cape got a gradient and the rest of the outfit was mainly blue and black, except for the white bow and frilly sleeves. I painted in some lighting before starting to shade using my regular shading process. I added light from the right and left for this. For the colors of this light, I used a pinkish warm one from the right and a cooler bluish one from the left. You will also see I tend to make black parts of my illustrations brighter while shading, so I can see the part I'm shading more easily. I prefer this over turning up the brightness of my screen, since it can strain my eyes. I also added some watery magic coming from his hand. I'm not sure how it would work, but I guess he would have water powers combined with magic. Maybe he'd be able to make different kinds of water using his magic, like poisonous or leaf healing and hot and cold water, depending on what he would currently need. Now we're moving on to the character that most people probably already saw or knew even before Fontaine was announced, which is Liney. Here I sketched in the pose myself. At first I noticed that the upper body was too angled downwards, like the viewer would look down at the character to me, so I adjusted this. I noticed that I have a tendency to draw poses where you look down at the characters naturally, and in the pose I went with, you can still see this, the viewer is slightly above Liney here. I tried out a bunch of leg positions for the front leg. I also marked the body's anatomy to make sure the proportions wouldn't look off. Since I wasn't using a reference for drawing this pose, doing this was important to me. I sketched in some hands myself and then moved on to the outfit. Here I sketched in some cape parts, short pants, boots and frilly parts on his arm. For his torso, I at first wanted to give him a big frilly collar, but then I decided to go for a bow, a bit similar to Neuvillette before. The cape parts for one come from his upper arms as well as from the back of his shirt. In this design I wanted to include many sharp shapes with some star shapes in there as well. For the head I was thinking about giving him a cylinder similar to his in-game design as well, but I went with a witch head once again. It just has a longer pointy end this time. I then sketched in various parts from his in-game design. You can see for this character I already sketched in the base and only used these patterns to add as accessoires or patterns in the outfit afterwards. Then it was time for the liner. This went pretty smoothly for this character. Since his outfit was pretty tight, I could often just focus on drawing a nice body outline and didn't have to add many folds. I started with the body and bigger outfit parts and then moved on to adding smaller accessoires and patterns. I also included just one glove because the outfit was looking pretty symmetrical to me and I wanted to break this up a bit. Drawing the patterns on his cape took some time, but since it were just simple rectangles it wasn't too difficult. Since I wanted all illustrations to match up a bit, I then went with the same color scheme as for Ryothesly with Liney here, with mostly black, red, grey, but also a few white parts. I used 2 shades of red to make the different parts stand out a bit more. Just the same shade for the cape would have looked too boring to me. For lighting, I started with some red light from the right. I was already imagining Liney having some kind of magic coming from the finger with which he was pointing. Maybe his glove even enables him to do magic. That could also be an interesting concept. Imagine you'd have a character who's able to do one kind of magic with one hand and then some other kind of magic with the other, but only if they wear their magic glove. I also added in blue light from the other side. Having warm as well as cool light helps to make your lighting look more dynamic. I enjoyed doing this. I also thought about adding in a greenish light for the middle, mainly to make his legs and the tight outfit seem a bit more shiny. The light from the right and left already were enough to me in the end though. For the magic on the right, I went with some magical fire, fitting to his powers or vision in-game. For adding this magic, I like to make use of layer effects such as outer glow. The final character I'll talk about is Freminette. Something I also found interesting is that for both Liney and Freminette, one of their eyes is covered by hair. This means drawing them can be a bit easier since you don't have to worry about the eye symmetry that much, unless you're like me and you like to draw in both eyes anyways. I like to still show eyes or eyebrows that are covered by hair in my art. Just like with Liney, I came up with the pose myself for this, but I was unhappy with the back leg I drew, so you'll see I changed this up later on. The biggest struggle for this illustration definitely was adjusting the leg's position. I wanted all illustrations to match together. Because of this, I noticed that Freminette's leg being stretched out as far down would not look that nice with the other poses. Here I learned how important it is for me to already check that all poses line up before drawing the illustrations. I only noticed this after I had already colored my illustration. Because of this, adjusting the legs afterwards took a really long time. It was very tedious, so I can only recommend already figuring out the pose and making sure it works during the sketching phase. While I did spend a long time adjusting the pose and leg here, I didn't draw in as many outfit variations as for Werther's sleeve, for example. Over time, as I was working on this project, I found coming up with outfits and deciding on outfit pieces easier. Drawing in all the patterns for the outfit took a pretty long time here. I went with shorter pants and wider sleeves. The patterns and cuts were once again inspired by his in-game design. Getting the accessoires on his legs and the shoes to be in proper perspective was one of my bigger struggles here. Color-wise, I reused the palette for Neuvillette. This way I would have 2 red and black and 2 blue and black illustrations. I thought having this contrast of warm and cold colors for the designs would be nice. It also fit to the color schemes the characters have in-game. I did have a difficult time with determining what colors I wanted which outfit part to have. I lined up some variations with different colors applied to the outfit along with my 3 already drawn illustrations to see what would fit together the best. Because of this, I also included a gradient with turquoise to blue, just like with Neuvillette. It fit well to the other illustrations this way. Finally, for the lighting, I again added some from both sides. From the left we have a warm pinkish one and from the right a cold bluish one. I also added in smaller colorful highlights at different parts of this illustration. I'm still trying to figure out how many and where I want to include these, but I like adding some hue variations to make the colors more interesting. And that's it for the last character. I also added some simple backgrounds after recording, and this is how all the illustrations turned out in the end. Which of them or which character do you like most? Finally, here are a few things I learned and want to improve on. For the poses, I discovered how much I like to use my daily drawings when possible, since I already spent the time to figure out the anatomy of the characters when drawing them. Then I also like to just prepare all poses for one project to make sure the characters line up before drawing the illustrations. The outfits I draw tend to look pretty tight. Here this was also the case because I didn't draw in many folds. I want to try drawing more oversized clothes in the future as well. Then for outfit variations, for me to avoid having too many and not get overwhelmed by options, what can help would be to for one stop and think about the outfits before drawing them, as well as limiting myself by saying I'll only draw in like 2 or 3 variations for the shoes. The capes and flowy parts look alright, but to me they could look nicer. When I look at the Mahoyaku references, for example, I find they look very dynamic. I want to be inspired by this as well. Something that's also different from the illustrations here is that I added thickness or depth to the clothes. I'm not sure if I want to do this in the future. Both looks, having added depth or just drawing the clothes with simple outlines, can look nice to me, so I want to experiment with this some more. Finally, the lighting and adding color variations is also something I want to look more into. I know I like to add in purpley and bluish as well as maybe turquoise or pinkish hues, but I'm not sure where and how many. I want to establish some form of rules for myself, so it's easier for me to include this in my illustrations. I also want to do this for adding colorful light like I did here. That would be it for some things I learned while drawing. Maybe this inspires you and helps you in your art as well. Also let me know if there are any AUs you'd like to see me draw Genshin characters in. I've drawn them for a mermaid or in a ballet or cafe AU, for example, and I'd like to do something similar to this again soon. For next October I could also imagine myself designing some characters like I did last year, but for this year drawing the Fontaine characters was really nice. I hope you have a nice day, thanks for watching and bye.